Fresh air, that's the precious boon of heaven. And fortunate indeed are those who live where there is a lot of fresh air. I'm Agatha Thrash, a staff physician from Uchee Pines Institute, where we have a lot of fresh air. It's very good down in the Alabama rural land, and we enjoy the fresh air. But fresh air is a lot more than we might think of just as the delicious smell of good fresh air. During the next half an hour, we'll be talking about some of the great benefits of air. So we hope you will join us for that discussion.
The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented. Welcome to Help Yourself to Health with Dr. Agatha Thrash of Uchee Pines Institute. And now, here's your host, Dr. Thrash.
We often think of fresh air as just being not shut up in some closed space accidentally. Or maybe we think of it as being out in the open, but actually we can live for only 3 minutes without air. But fresh air, we don't have to have that, and we can still live. We just won't live so well. So what we want to do is to find out how to live well. So in order to do that, we need to study the composition of air. We need to understand something about our relationship to it and the relationship of good health to good air. And so with me here is Don Miller, Uchee Pines lifestyle counselor, and he will tell you something about the composition of air. Don Miller.
Okay. Well, Dr. Thrash, when you said that we don't necessarily have to have fresh air in order to live, that's good, or we would all be dead, because we are really living in one polluted world, and that's a great misfortune and a great sorrow to many of our hearts. But we are surrounded by a great cloud, a great atmosphere of gases and particles suspended in the air. I'm just amazed when I walk outside and look up and see those clouds. Tons of water just hanging up there, ready to refresh the earth. We certainly have a wonderful atmosphere. And it's interesting, we can look at our atmosphere and we breathe nicely in it. Were we to stick our head in a bucket of water, we would drown. A fish in water, doing just fine, bring it out into our atmosphere, it would drown, and both of us live on oxygen. You know, when God was in that creative process back there that first week, it was amazing how He made each one of us able to take in what we need. The plants, they are giving off what we need and taking in what we are giving. It's a real giving environment that we're in, and the trouble is we've taken far too much from it. Now, when we think about what's the composition of our atmosphere, what's it made up of? First of all, I will say that underneath 10,000 feet, we've got about a third of our atmosphere. It's pretty thick down here. The higher you go, the thinner it is. Go up to about 29,000 feet, that's about Mount Everest height. It's about 75% of the atmosphere is below that point. Now, you've seen these men who climb Mount Everest, and women also. They've got to wear oxygen equipment because it's so rare up there. Beyond that, very, very light air cannot sustain life quite well. Now, what is it made up of? What elements make up our atmosphere? People think, well, it's made up of oxygen. Well, if our atmosphere is just oxygen, the next time you lit your candles for your birthday cake, you and the rest of the world would celebrate your last birthday, because poof, it would go up in one big explosion. But God has made it just right. I'm going to sort of make an illustration here. We'll take this ball here. This is nitrogen. About 79% of our atmosphere is made up of nitrogen. That's so that it does not burn our nose. About 20% of our atmosphere is oxygen. That gives us our life-giving current. And then about 1% is made up of helium and argon and carbon dioxide and the other gases that make it just the right proportion. And in the right proportion, we have good health, which is exactly what God wants us to have. Now, of course, to have good health, we've got to get that oxygen into us, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I want to talk about air. That's outside the house. Now, there are other problems with air outside the house, which I will address in a few moments. But let's go inside the house. We're inside the house. And many people, it's amazing, all the windows closed, the doors closed. How long does the air stay good in a house with people in it when it's all closed up? Well, it depends on a number of things. 1, how many people are in the room? 2, how big is the room? And 3, is there any wind or any air at all getting into the room? Each one of us, every breath, breathes in about a pint of air. That's about 120 gallons per minute. Or per hour, I'm sorry, about 120 gallons per minute, or hour. So here we have this room. You are breathing in this air. Now, we have to understand that when we breathe in the air, we are using the oxygen, but we're also breathing out some of that oxygen. We did not use up all the oxygen. If so, CPR would be no good. When you give CPR to a person, you are, what we're doing, rescue breathing for them. You take a breath and blow it into their lungs. Well, there's still oxygen in what you give off, but there's also more carbon dioxide because your body has taken that oxygen in burning process in your cells, gave off carbon dioxide, so now you're slowly building up the amount of carbon dioxide in your room. If you remember back in the 60s, I believe it was, maybe the 70s, when Apollo 13 went towards the moon, they had a problem on board, and one of the things that went wrong is their oxygen scrubber, their air scrubber went down, which they could no longer scrub the carbon dioxide in the air and turn it back into oxygen. And if they were not able to switch over these scrubbers, they would have been in real serious situation. They came within a couple of degrees of perishing on the way back to Earth after their spacecraft became crippled. And so we need to have our air ventilated. We need to have fresh breathing space. Every year, there are some fatalities in this world of people, especially in colder climates and more affluent climates. Let's talk about, matter of fact, one that happened in California not too many years ago. A nice, well-built cabin, double insulated windows, everything was just batten down the hatches. They had a nice fire going in a fireplace, and it was a nice evening. It was cold outside, so everything was shut down, and everyone went to bed. Well, the fire continued burning and burning and burning, and it slowly ate up all the oxygen. And the people never woke up because the oxygen was depleted. Carbon dioxide, which is all they're giving off, was what became the major gas in the room, and that cannot sustain human life. And the people lost their lives. We need to have our windows opened. Now, how long does a room stay fresh with nobody in it? Well, first of all, a room, no matter how nice the room is, closed up, the air will get stale. And there's other things in the air that's going to cause it to get stale. Everything outgasses. The carpets, the walls, especially nowadays, all these things that are made, they have mold retardants and they have pesticides just built into the fibers and into the fabrics and the flooring and the drywall, everything. All these are outgassing. So quite frankly, in a closed-up room, it's not fresh to start with. And so my recommendation is learn to keep your windows open. I remember when I was in elementary school, and I loved it. I had an old elementary school called Oakley Elementary School in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I remember, of course, I was little, so everything seemed so huge, but it seemed like the ceilings went so high up there. And I remember my teacher, my 6th grade teacher, this one that finally made an impression on me. She would crack the bottom window, and then she'd take this long pole, this hook on it, and go up, and she'd crack the top window. And I never understood, what is she doing? I didn't understand that until I understood the chimney effect. What that was doing, we realized that hot air rises, and as hot air rises, it pulls in other air, and so cool air is coming in the bottom, rotating up to the top, going out the top, and we had this constant chimney effect, which kept the room cool, but probably more of her concern was, maybe for a 6th grader, it's not such a concern about students going to sleep in class. That's more in your churches nowadays. But it kept us more awake, more aware, more oxygen. They knew that. Now windows all close to the right or to the left. Those are air conditioning windows. And quite frankly, I would rather my air be conditioned by the outdoor atmosphere rather than by a machine outside my house. Not the best way to live, although I live in Alabama and I wish I had some sometimes, but I still am happy at nighttime. I can open my windows, turn on my ceiling fan, take a cold shower, lay there on my sheets, and get to sleep at night. So I like to have lots of oxygen and fresh air in my room, and I think we need to have that in our homes all the time, Dr. Thrash.
Yes, it's a fact that we should have in our homes all the time. We should have window open. We should have circulating air that never fails us. So as we study this matter, we need to recognize that we sometimes put our attention on things that are not so very important. We do put our attention on our personal relationships, and that's good. We do need to do that. We also put our attention on our food, and that's good. We need to do that. And on the water that we drink, some of us will not drink tap water. We only drink filtered water or distilled water, and that's good too. We need to be attentive about that. We will even be attentive about the temperature of the air. But we need to be more concerned about the quality of the air than we have been. Sometimes you will go to church and the air is not fresh, so you will say to one of the deacons, could we have some fresh air? They go immediately to the thermostat, not to the window. And if they go to the thermostat, it should be to turn the temperature up so they can open the air if the air is cold outside, because we need constantly to have circulating fresh air. A human being throws off waste products into the air as they breathe. They also throw off some carbon dioxide and a little bit of carbon monoxide. Fortunately, they breathe out also some of the nitrogen and oxygen and other substances that they have breathed in too, so it's not all taken up by the blood. It's we refresh the internal tissues, but we don't take up all the substances that are in the air. Then also, when we breathe, we need to air condition and filter the air that we take in. So that's all done by the very complex mechanisms that we have in the nose and respiratory passages, all the way down to the very tiniest alveoli that we have. In all those areas, we have filtering systems so that we can keep the air as filtered and nice as we can for the blood. Yet, it is a fact that we often do not do our part as well as we could. And Valerie Schreiber is going to tell you something about how we can breathe in a way that will also improve all of this function. So Valerie, tell us something about that.
Yes, Dr. Agatha. I'd like to tell you about proper breathing and the various things that it facilitates in our body. Number one, deep breathing aids in digestion by massaging the internal organs, and I'll show you how that's done in just a few minutes. But I also want to tell you how it assists in the return of blood to the heart by causing a negative pressure to develop in the chest, thereby decongesting your head and hopefully stopping the likelihood of headaches, because headaches usually come from extra blood, which is congestion pooled in the head. So just deep breathing can relieve that condition for you. Also, deep breathing pulls blood up from the legs, thereby making it unlikely for your lower extremities to have congested or pooled blood in the lower legs. Also, this exercise about deep breathing that we're going to show you in just a few minutes encourages the flow of blood from the gastrointestinal tract to the liver for processing. Also, after we have eaten a meal, our blood is usually heavily loaded with nutrients and it needs some assistance back to the heart. So you can see that just deep breathing along with some exercise facilitates many processes in our body that are very important that you would never, think about, that breathing is going to aid my digestion and help my blood get back to the heart, but yes, it does. In fact, I can tell you a few more things that deep breathing does that I share with the patients, and that comes in where depression or anxiety, I tell them to go outside, look at nature for a few minutes, and do some deep breathing, and you will find that it's just like a tranquilizer. You don't have to go to the store and buy them or get a prescription. Just deep breathe God's fresh air for a few minutes, and you'll start to relax. I've had the patients come back in and say, it is amazing. I can't believe what that fresh air did for me. I feel so much better. So I encourage you to do the very same thing. Now, how do you deep breathe? Breathing is, we automatically breathe, but it's one of the processes in our body that we can choose to facilitate. So we can take in a deep breath, we can hold our breath, we can let it out. But one way to facilitate good breathing is to good posture. Today so many of us are crunched over at our desk, we're couch potatoes at night at the TV, we're driving behind the car. you know, we're on the computer all day, and can you just see what's happening? The chest is all crunched over, and those poor lungs, they don't even know what it is to get good oxygen all the way down in them. We're kind of just breathing off the top of them, where we need to be standing with good posture. And good posture, one way that you can do it for yourself relatively simply to see if you're standing properly so that you can breathe right, is just kind of get into a good comfortable position. Make sure that your head is erect. You're not going to do some military thing here, but you just lift your shoulders up to your ears like this, and then you just roll them back comfortably, not jerk them back into a military type of stance, and then just try and kind of drop them down. And you're kind of in just a comfortable position. Now that is proper standing, as well as I can show you on Melissa in just a few minutes how you can measure yourself to make sure your head's in the right place, because another position that we find ourselves in is many times we're crunched over like this and then our heads are jetted out like this, and it was never meant for our body to be like this. And so one way that you can check yourself to see if you're holding your head properly is, I'll show you here on Melissa, is you just can take a pen and put your head like this, and here's your cheekbone and here's your collarbone. So you want to make sure that it's standing up straight, not jetted out to where it's over this way or back this way if you were in that military stance and you're not to be that. It should be just right over top of your collarbone or your clavicle. And that is where your head really should be. One of the other things about practicing deep breathing is, besides good posture, that you can learn by reading out loud. If you're reading out loud and walking, it'll cause you to deep breathe more. Climbing steps, exercising also helps you with your deep breathing. Now, one of the things that a lot of people don't take in consideration is they think as long as they're sucking in that good breath, they're getting plenty of it. But in order to get in good air and to fill your lungs up, the important part is to make sure you expel. And it's how much you expel to how much you can inhale. That's the important part in deep breathing. Now, how would you do that? Now, what you can do is you in through your nose. Now, I can't talk and do it, but you'll get the general idea. And put your hand on your tummy, because when you start inhaling, it's not like this. You want to inhale slowly, and you'll feel your tummy starting to expand. And so you sort of do it like this. You just start, and you keep breathing in slow and slow and slow. And then when you think you cannot take another breath, you just try to do it. You just try to go and get in another good one in there. And then hold it to maybe the count of 5 or the count of 10. And then don't do a type of thing. You won't be able to let it all out at that, and that's not proper. What you want to do is purse your lips like this, and then you're going, and you're just slowly letting it out. And when you get to where you think you've left every drop out, you just go, get the last little bit out. And then you can begin starting to breathe in through your nose. And this is the way to really give yourself a good tranquilizer if you're nervous or in a state of anxiety. It is wonderful to do it this way, but this is a good way to get good fresh air in your lungs. And you know, I say that. What is fresh air? You hear about negative ions, positive air. What in the world are they talking about? And where do we get this? You know, you hear the ionized machines and so forth. Fresh air is simply electrified air. You know how when there's a good thunder and lightning storm, run outside when it's over with, because you can breathe in negatively charged air, which means it's electrically charged. It's alive. You see, positive air, dead air, that Don was talking about, that's dead air. Positive air is dead air. That happens in enclosed places. And so many of us, we work in an enclosed building. We live in an enclosed house. We drive in an enclosed car. And you no wonder that it affects us. And some of the ways that it affects us is it causes us to be irritable. We can't reason properly. And I can show you how this affects here, back here on a chart that I have. Lack of oxygen is very similar to having a drink of alcohol, how it affects your brain, because you're not able to reason properly, your will doesn't work properly, your judgment, you can't make good judgment decisions, and your emotions are all turked. I've heard people say, when I get up in the morning, I'm as irritable as a snake, don't talk to me till about 10 or 12 o'clock, and then I'm better. But a lot of that can be just from the fact of not having good fresh air in your room at night, to where you can be breathing those good negative ions, because negative ions come when you go by the ocean. Have you ever been to the ocean, and when you leave you feel so great? Well, you know, you've got exercise out there, sunshine, but you have gotten that good negative ionized electrified air, and it'll make you sleep and feel so good. Well, it happens when you go in the mountains as well, when you go out into the woods or the forest where there's lots of trees, and in the early morning hours. That's a good time to do your exercise, and you'll get good negative ionized electrified air that will just freshen your whole body for all the functions that you need to do throughout the day. Now, office workers, I encourage you at all possible, go out at your lunch hour, at your 10 o'clock so-called coffee break. Don't go drink coffee, it'll kill you anyway. Go outside and get a glass of water, drink a glass of water, and go outside and breathe some fresh air. I grant you, your work production will be much better, you'll be much happier, much more cheerful. Now, I want to show you why, when you're breathing deep, and you'll look over here on this chart that I have about breathing and exercise. We have a muscle that's right up under the rib cage called the diaphragm. And a good way to describe this muscle to you, it's like a window shade. It kind of rolls up and down. And if you'll look here on my chart, you'll see right here, when you have good respiration, the diaphragm rolls down. You'll notice right here the lungs are filling up and the diaphragm is rolling down. When you expire the air, you'll see that the diaphragm arches up and the lungs are much smaller because it's pushing the air out. Now you get a triple benefit. If you go outside and you deep breathe and you exercise, and you're going to get sunshine, and if you go in the early morning hours, you're going to get all those good negative ions, you will have what I have shown right here on this picture. I have the arrows up here showing where the diaphragm is going to roll down, but because you're going for a nice good walk as well, you see I have the arrows pointing up from the leg, you're going to get this reaction happening to your internal organs. And it's going to be massaging your internal organs. And that's why after you've eaten a good meal, it's good to go out for just a nice slow walk, not a fast, vigorous walk, because you'll take the blood away from the internal organs to your extremities. But if you go for just a nice walk, it exercises the internal organs, and therefore you'll digest your food much better. But you get some more pluses besides. Here are your intestines, and it will help peristalsis, so you'll be more regular in your bowels. When you're exercising and deep breathing and you're creating this exercise that's happening in your internal organs, you're giving good integrity to the walls of all your internal organs, and you could possibly prevent a lot of prolapses. You hear prolapses? Well, that's when the intestines sort of hang down because they're weak and flabby and filled up with junk food all the time, and you never get exercise and you're always scrunched over. So you get many prolapses, bladder prolapses, the pelvic prolapses, and the floor of the pelvic gets weak. But if you do good exercises and deep breathing, you will strengthen all this area of your body. So I encourage you, learn how to deep breathe. Learn how to go out for a good walk. And most people are always saying, oh, I just don't have time for it. Well, let me read you a scripture and a quote that is my favorite. Ecclesiastes 4:5 says this, "A fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh." And so that's what will happen to you. If you don't take time for your health, you're going to consume your own flesh. And Earl of Derby says that. He says, those who cannot find time for exercise will have to find time for illness. Thank you.
Very good. I think that gives us a very good understanding of some of the anatomy involved, and also how the internal organs respond to very good posture and also to very good breathing. But even so, some of us may get some diseases of the chest and diseases of the lungs, and Don Miller is going to talk with you about some of those things having to do with the diseases or conditions of the chest and some other matters. Don Miller.
I want to throw one more thing in here because this matter of breathing is very important, and someone's shown me another way to practice this good breathing techniques, and this is a very easy one. I want you to write down 1, 4, 2. Just remember those numbers, 1, 4, 2. You breathe in, you're taking a walk, you breathe in to a count of 1, whatever 1 might be. Let's say you're walking and you take 4 paces for the 1. That's 1. Now you multiply that by 4. And so you hold your breath for 16, 4, 8, 12, 16. And then you expire, or exhale, you multiply by 2, that 4 steps. And so you exhale for 8. You do that and you're going to find yourself really to get that last bit out, and that will help. And that's the problem with people who have things like emphysema. A person with emphysema, it's not so much a problem with inhaling, it's a problem with exhaling and getting the lungs, the air out of the lungs because they've lost their elasticity. Things aren't working well. And so they tend to get rather barrel-chested because they're always in that sort of the inhaled position, and they cannot get down in the exhaled position. And so they have this larger chest, and they basically end up suffocating because they cannot get the air out of their lungs. Now, this is caused by people living or basically smoking. That's one of the main causes of emphysema, but it can also be caused by people living in areas of high pollution. We were in the state of Arkansas a few years ago, and an old man came into one of our meetings, and this man was just a wheezing and a huffing and a puffing, and we wondered, what's the matter with this man? I figured he'd smoked all of his life. It turns out he had been a classmate of one of the old saints at Uchee Pines, and this man had been a clean liver, but not clean liver, but he had lived clean for all of his life, but he had found his ministry in the LA basin. And in the LA basin, sometimes you have what's called a temperature inversion. The cool air comes down at night, and it's cooler than the air above. So it traps all those pollutants, and it becomes very, very polluted down there, and he breathed this polluted air all of his life. And these temperature inversions happen all the time. One happened in London in 1952, killed 4,000 people. We need to make sure that we've got clean air where we are at. And if we're not living in an area where there is clean air, perhaps it's time to move to an area of cleaner air. Stay away from carbon monoxide. We hear about people who back up their cars to their motel rooms, and in the morning in the cold winter they go out and turn on their car while it's getting ready. They're getting ready, and the air conditioning is sucking in that carbon monoxide, which is a bad way to go, Dr. Thrash.
Yes, it is. There are so many ways that we can pollute the air around us, and it makes us susceptible to many different kinds of diseases that we otherwise would not be susceptible to. So we hope that you will enjoy this precious boon of heaven, that you will be strong and healthy, that all of your internal organs will be healthy and massaged nicely by your good breathing techniques.